and we are back with another great episode of Secure Halt Podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of bringing on another individual that understands the value of being vulnerable in order to overcome our issues. Yuma Barnett, former Ranger, and now a podcaster like myself, spreading the good word that we don't have to stay in our lowest of lows. We can overcome all the things that people tell us that we can't, like PTSD and trauma. We can absolutely overcome it, just like we overcame so many things in our career. Yuma, thank you for being here today, brother. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm looking forward to be on the other side of the microphone here.
That's right. I promise I'm not going to grill you too much, but I do want to, again, I always preach the concept that connection and sharing our journeys is what's really going to reach out and help others overcome their issues and make it on the other side. And we always value the boots on the ground perspective. We always value the lessons learned from the individual when we're coming back from deployments, when we're coming back from a school, but we never connect and we never talk about it when it comes to mental health. And today I'd like to talk about your journey, brother. So please take it away. Tell us about your mission and your path to success.
Oh man, I don't even know where to start. Right. So, born and raised in New Mexico on a cattle ranch. So I knew, joining the army and being in the army is probably the easiest thing I ever did after growing up in the ranch and lifestyle, right? Which is also a kind of a blue collar, hard lifestyle where you don't really talk about your problems and share about what's going on, So
yeah.
And aside with that, I grew up, team sports, another place where you don't talk a lot about your mental health. It's all about, the next man up mentality, getting through it, being tough. Spent 21 years in the Army, most of it in the 75th Ranger Regiment, bounced around a little bit within the organization, was able to go to Australia for a couple years, went up to Dahlonega, was a Ranger School instructor for about 18 months, but most of my career in the 75th Ranger Regiment. And to, to preserve time, I'll cut to the last part of it when we talk about mental health and stuff. So I had a break in service in 2004 and it didn't go well. Did everything you're not supposed to do, right? Didn't have a good plan. Some of the plan that I did have fell apart. So, a bad break in service. And so when it came back to time to retire, I have a family now. And I knew that I couldn't have the same, repeat the same mistakes as last time. And I kind of had a moment where I started looking around at other retired service members around my pay grade and guys, maybe E7s and a little lower. And I started to see kind of a pattern of where they were struggling on the other side. And that struggle doesn't necessarily always boil down to one thing, whether it's finances or getting a divorce or, ultimately some guys committing suicide. But I just saw like a pattern of people either having one of those issues or maybe multiple. So I was like, I need to avoid that. So to hopefully avoid that, I had to do what I had been avoiding for 20 plus years, which was the mental health side, right? I compartmentalized every issue that came up, every tough situation or scenario. I just put it in a bucket and stuck it somewhere in the back of my mind and thought, I'll deal with it later. And looking around, I was like, I think a lot of these guys and gals that are struggling never dealt with that stuff. They just left it in there. And at some point when they got out and found themselves alone, it hit them, right? So I was like, how can I avoid this? So went to some used what the unit provided and went and saw the mental health providers and lied to them for probably the first 6 months to a year.
Yep.
And until I found one that I connected with me and held me accountable, right? Didn't let me get away with the BS of it. And, peeled the onion all the way back, we're talking about things in my childhood and stuff, things that, I hadn't talked about forever. And, having the realization of how childhood traumas can tie into combat traumas and lifelong traumas and, just really peeled the onion away of myself and, went on this mental health journey, brought my wife along for a good portion of it. And it really changed my whole perspective on life and the things I did. And during that time, I joined the Honor Foundation, went to the Honor Foundation. A lot of the things that they do also helped me open up and be able to share my story. And with that, I started saying, well, now that I've done it, instead of just keeping it to myself, these successes that I found, I should probably start sharing with people that in around the, the battalion headquarters and in the companies and then the locker rooms and in the gyms, that's when it really gets hard, right? Is
Yeah.
talking about that stuff outside of the psychologist's echo chamber, right? Where you're, it was hard at first, but then it became a safe place. But now how do I share this with my brothers on the outside and tell them, hey, I've been diagnosed with PTSD and saying that out loud when there's the fear of the stigma still pretty heavy, still there now, was still very heavy when I was going through this. But once I started sharing it and telling people, more people started saying, yeah, I'm seeing the psychologist too, or I've done it too. And you never knew it. Right. And it kind of helped normalize it. So just with the importance of it and still seeing a lot of guys struggle with their own mental health stuff and ultimately some suicides that struck very close to me. I was always the one that looked at suicide as the weak, it's weakness. It's somebody looking for a way out, not facing their problems. And there's some truth in like not facing your problems and looking out. But once somebody that I knew very well and I respected and was, the A-type guy, like the person you say he'll never, like, I can't believe he did that type person.
Yeah.
That's when it really dawned on me, like, I am him and he is me. There's not a lot of difference here. So started just thinking, how do we kind of break down the stigma and stuff? And the only way to do it is to talk about it. Right. So I'm no professional by any means, but I know just the power of conversation. So along with being vocal about my own mental health journey and then wanting to share the stories of those that I had heard, right? Because I think it's important because it's hard to have you can have a one-on-one conversation, but you can't affect anybody that's outside of that conversation. So while I was still in the 75th, I started my podcast, the Leading with Vulnerability podcast, because it's uncomfortable to say, right? It's uncomfortable to look at. And that's on purpose because I was hoping that people that were struggling and that were looking would see that and come to it with curiosity and hoping something would happen. So I started this podcast and it was about 2 episodes in. I was, I'm still in the service. I had a message from somebody who said, I listened to your show. There was somebody on there that I knew and respected. And, I didn't know he went through what he went through. And now I'm going through the same thing. And I was on the brink of, of it in my own life. And because I heard this person's story and I knew him and it resonated with me, I know I can get through it now. So that kind of started my whole journey of continuing to tell stories, about from our military brothers and sisters, from the soft community, the, conventional forces, along with business business people as well, because I think the struggles are similar for very successful business types, right? They have hard days too, and when Friday comes around and they don't know if they're going to be able to make payroll, that's a struggle. That's hard, and there's mental challenges there that are separate from just combat trauma. There's traumas that you're going through when you can't feed your kids and stuff like that. So sharing those stories and the importance of it can't be understated. And that's kind of my truncated elevator version of, my military career and my mental health journey. And I'm looking forward to digging into it more with you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so much of that strikes a chord with my own personal journey. We were raised in a time period where we didn't have time to take a knee for mental health. You didn't. And it became sort of like a cancer.
Right.
I remember there were a few individuals that did speak up, or they mentioned it, or they had very open breakdowns. You never talked to them and never saw them again. A lot of the main concern was remove the individual. Let's not talk about this. Let's not address why this guy had a breakdown at a course. And you never heard about them again. You never saw them. They're up at group headquarters or they moved companies. And that gave you the understanding of like, oh shit, like that's a bad thing. Yeah. That's a horrible thing. Don't Don't ever talk about it. You just keep pushing it down. And it just feeds into the maladaptive coping devices, which is like, okay, if you're having a tough day, you drink. Just drink.
Correct. Yeah.
Just go out and do what everybody else does, which is shut up and drink. And I want to ask, and I want to ask, what was they're very much identical warrior class mentalities at play, both in Ranger Regiment and special forces. The same type A personalities. What were some of the things that you were that you fell victim to? Did you fall victim to the drinking?
Yeah. So, earlier on, I'd say, like the 2008, 2009 time frame when things were really busy, like the deployments were just like constant. I mean, people like to give the regiment and some of us a hard time, like, oh, you only deployed for 4 or 5 months at a time. And I'm always like, yeah, but that 7 months I was home was like balls to the wall. Sometimes I was home. Maybe for that 7, I might have been home for, 30 days of that 7 on the pillow. And the rest of the time was off training and doing things. And when you're going that fast, you're going to you have to find something to shut your brain off. Right. Yeah. Some people, fortunately, they're able to find it in faith or some healthy activity. But in most cases, in a lot of cases, it's alcohol, right? And I when I was drinking alcohol heavy in this, I didn't even know I was doing it, right? It was
none of us do.
It was get off, it was finish training or whatever is going on for the day, or in the company headquarters in the platoon area, and kick the boots off and have a couple beers, and then go home, and then suddenly that you have a couple beers at home, and then suddenly the couple beers at home turned into like a 6-pack every night, 6 or 8 beers every night. And it was just, like you said, it was just a way to kind of like shut the brain off and turn the anxiety off and turn off the thought of the training event tomorrow, or the not only the training event, but the paperwork that needed to get done and all the extracurricular stuff that was not part of like the everyday job, like the shitty part of the job, the office work. And I think a lot of us, I think ADHD kind of runs rampant in our community. And
hard carrying member myself.
to shut that down, alcohol was the easiest way to do it, right? Because it's everywhere. It's just in the culture. It's the way it is. And thankfully, though, right, every 7 months I deployed and sobered up again. Right. So where I saw, when I was a Ranger School instructor, I saw a lot of guys. They would deploy for their 15 months and be home for a year, and they would really fall in a dark space because they didn't have that break for that year. They just went hard on the alcohol for 12 months straight or whatever it was till the next rotation came around, and it really tore them up. And I saw it and heard a lot of those stories, but you find things, unhealthy habits, and alcohol's one, food can be one, right?
Yes. Nobody talks about that. Nobody fucking talks about emotional eating.
Yeah.
We think of that as being something that occurs in a different world. That's a stay-at-home mom. That's the executive. No, that happens to our guys as well. That is something it'll kill you just as much, maybe not as fast, but it will kill you. And I've seen brothers struggle with that.
Yeah. My whole career, I'm a bigger guy. I'm 6'2". I'm always right there. Hey, line up for the tape test, for the next one. I might've been running 5 miles in 35 minutes, but I like to donut every once in a while too. Along with the beer, the bad eating habits, the bad sleeping habits, it just all starts to pile up, and we have those. I think we all have had those aha moments, and mine. I've had a couple of them, and I've been fortunate to get through them. I think one of my earliest ones is when I was I was either a senior team leader, a junior squad leader. The moment when I woke up at my house, my car's there, and I go, "Who drove home?" And they're like, "You drove home," and it's like, "Oh, damn, I don't remember that." So that's a sobering thing for a minute, because in our line of work, you get the DUI, it's kind of a death sentence on your career, and at times throughout the military, it's been a military career death sentence as well. And, I used to always say when I was leading people, I mean, we all messed up, right? I just didn't get caught.
Yeah.
And as long as you learn from it, and I was fortunate to learn from those mistakes, but it's alcohol. I think is alcohol is probably the biggest catalyst for all things in our community, right?
Yep.
Because then that's what leads to the guys pissing hot and doing cocaine and smoking a joint out when he's with the SCAD kids in Savannah, you know. And it's just it's hard to explain to people that haven't lived our lifestyle, that that it's hard to control, that at times it controls us, and it's just simply, I think, that it's just so we can shut that part of our brain off for a few hours. And I'm still, I drink now still, but I'm more cognizant of it, right? And
Yep.
I'm not 23 anymore, and I was fortunate, I was fortunate to have those aha moments, right? Where I yelled at
Yep.
my wife or my kids because I was drinking too much, and I was able to have a moment of clarity in that moment, and be able to self-correct back on to the right course. But I could talk for hours about myself and my brothers
Yep.
drinking and alcohol, how it's taken us down a dark path. And I think it's worse on the other side of the uniform, right?
Yes.
Because that's other side is drinking alone a lot of
Oh
the
yeah.
time. It's
Yep.
one thing when you're drinking with your boys, and hopefully you have that one clear-minded guy there that takes care of everybody and gets them back in the
Yep.
van. There's nights when that guy's not there. We've all been to those nights, but now when I don't, it's easy to just drink, a bottle of wine, and I know I don't have a 5 mile run tomorrow or a PT test. And then you're just by yourself, and
Yep.
there's triggers, and those triggers are exacerbated by it when you start going down memory lane when you're had a few drinks and you get all emotional. So yeah, alcohol is it's one it's part of the culture. It's what it is. I don't know what the answer is there.
We have to, and looking at it from now, we're on the outside. I identify all the same things. The key thing is we don't have, or we think we don't have anything else to do. We think that it's the only thing that we can lean on, because the one thing that nobody talks about is the training's hard, the deployments are hard, but, and this just like I know it, it's the pressure cooker of knowing that if you fuck up just a little bit, you're fucking done. You're
Yeah.
done. You're bounced the fuck out of there. You ask anybody in a team or in Ranger Regiment, what's the worst fucking thing that can happen? And it's being off a team, being out of the
Yeah.
regiment. And fuck, the amount of friends that I have that have shared and divulged stories of, dude, I love being a Green Beret, but the one thing I wanted to be for the rest of my military career was in Ranger Regiment. And they got in trouble. They got in trouble and they got bounced out of regiment. And it was like, fuck. Isolated, alone. And it's the worst fucking, when they describe having to leave regiment because of a disciplinary issue, because of a small infraction, and they're like, fuck, I got sent to Fort Hood. I got sent. And they talk about it like it's fucking prison, because it is.
Yeah,
It
right.
is.
It is to us. Yeah.
After you've served in regiment and you've soared with the absolute best of the fucking best, and something happens, like, and you get sent to a place like fucking Fort Hood, it feels like a death sentence. And I've heard that from every single one of my friends who experienced that, and that fucking bounce back. Like, dude, there was months I didn't want to do anything. All I did was drink, and I just had to find another way to get out of there, find a way to go to another selection, find a way to get out of there. And they all clawed their way back into another organization. But you asked them, and it's like, hey, where would you rather be? I wish I was back at fucking regiment. It was the absolute best experience for them, but that pressure cooker led them to do things that sadly fucking got them out of their brotherhood. And that's what sucks. That's what really eats people up. You're so stressed out. You got to make it through this fucking school. You got to make it through this deployment. What do you turn to? What do you fucking turn to? I'm not going to go talk to a fucking mental health professional or talk to somebody about mindfulness for performance. I'm going to fucking drink.
Yep. 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 And you know, the funny thing, or it's not funny, the thing that when I look back on my career, right. And when I think about people and alcohol, we're always fast in regiment, you know, or any standards-based organization. You're fast to call them out if they're failing a PT test. You're fast to call them out if their kit's fucked up. You're fast to call them out if they're tactically unsound. But I don't know how many times I knew somebody had a drinking problem and I never said a word.
Yeah.
I never reported it up because I didn't want to be that guy, you know, and I think back on it, especially now when I took over at my platoon in 175, the platoon sergeant that I replaced, who's now passed away because of his excessive drinking, everybody knew that it was alcohol in his Popeyes cup, like a vodka or a beer with a straw. We knew it. Did we ever really say anything about it? No, not really. Nope. We just kind of said, you know, he's fucked up, you know, he's moving on. But we never like grabbed him by this collar and said, dude, you need to go get some help. Right. It didn't. And I've seen that a lot, right. Where we were fast to uphold a standard on things that were, you know, more apparent, but when it became kind of taboo or you knew somebody was doing something that they shouldn't be doing, we weren't going to say anything about it. And on the flip side, if they were a stud, we covered it up for them. Right.
Yes.
If the guy performed his ass off, you know, he was one of those breaking, you know, keeping a glass case until time of war, which we were at war for 20 years. It was okay. Right. We would cover up for him. And I've been that guy. I've been the guy that's been covered for when I showed up, you know, when I showed up not my best, right? Because I performed or I was a good team leader or a good squad leader or a good dude or the funny guy or the instead of pulling him aside and then putting him on the bench for a year or 6 months and getting him the help they need to where he could have performed better for longer, we just turned a blind eye to it because we needed him at the time, you know?
Absolutely. I experienced the same thing. You get somebody that walks into the team room door and they're E7 rangerment experience, fucking already free fall expert, like just they're already a professional athlete. But then you realize that this professional athlete is broken and they have a substance abuse program or substance abuse issue. What do? You do the same thing. You watch out for them. You cover their back, try to address the issue and like, hey, like, dude, we're worried about the next deployment. You're a weapon. You're a fucking tool. You're an asset. I'm not going to lose you for a fucking drinking program or a drug abuse program. We're going to continue to try to patch things together. We didn't realize that ultimately you are enabling that person.
Yeah.
You're allowing them to continue that destructive behavior because all you're seeing is like, man, that's a fucking great teammate. That's a powerful fucking weapon. We can't lose that person. We're going to continue to fucking hold them together. We're going to cover for them. But what happens after that deployment? What happens after you get the best out of that person? They're still in that fucking, they're still driving towards that destructive behavior, that path. That's all they know. And we've lost so many teammates because we're like, hey, you know, dude, that's the guy you fucking want in a firefight. That's the guy you want in Afghanistan.
Yep.
Just police him up. Just, you know, figure out a way to keep him sober long enough to get to the deployment.
Yep.
And so many dudes, that's a thing people don't realize. It's not some individual that can't function, that's fucked up. There are some of those like that. But for the most part, they're individuals that you look at them and you're like, holy fucking shit. They would make war movies about this fucking dude.
That's right.
Like, they would literally, like, fuck a Marvel hero. Like, these individuals are that fucking good. But when they get too much alcohol in their system, it's a fucking whole different individual.
Yeah. And I think, you know, when we talk about this, a lot of times, you know, when we're talking on podcasts like yours and mine, we talk about soft and this isn't a soft thing. This is a high performing athlete thing. Because if you look at like Antonio Brown, was a great wide
Yep.
receiver, he's a freaking head case.
Yep.
But he performed on the field, so nobody said, "Hey, let's pull him off for this game or this
Yeah.
gunfight, right? We're going to fix him." No, no, no. He's still putting up numbers and performing. And you can pull that from any sport out there where you
Yep.
can go up and look at people's stories now where they're broke, they're committed suicide, they made millions of
Yep.
dollars and are living under a bridge now. Uh, this alcohol and addiction and protecting of high performers is rampant through soft and high level sports. It's just
Absolutely.
it's something that it is. Yeah.
Yeah. The issues you struggle with as a kid that you bring into your adulthood that then manifest into bigger problems in the workforce, like that's a commonality. You find that in so many individuals. So it's not just us. It's not just our experience. This is a common humanity issue.
Yeah, that's right.
And
That's right.
I've seen the connections, and I've seen people, and there's a little fear. A lot of people will reach out and they'll be like, man, I know I'm not the same. It's like, look, if you're listening to this right now and you identify with this, but you've never served, guess what? This still applies to you. You're a human
That's right.
being. I know lots of guys that I have met through my journey in transition. They're like, man, like I never served a day in my life, but fuck, I got into high performance sales and
Yeah. Oh yeah.
dude, that is a pressure cooker.
Yep.
That lifestyle of, hey, I got to make X amount and I have to continue to perform. Yeah. Hell yeah. It's
Yep.
the same.
Yeah.
And they don't have to worry about a drug test.
No. 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 And it's culturally in real life and it's culturally in fiction. So
Yeah.
if you watch Suits, you watch Billions, you watch any of those shows that us like guys like
Yep.
us we like to watch. Well, they're at the office late drinking bourbons and
Yep.
this and that, and it's a cultural thing across the board. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to talk about it in situations like this
Yeah.
and we need leaders to be the leader that I wasn't when I was a squad leader, to stand up and say, Hey Joe, let's go see the commander about your let's
Yep.
get you fixed, right? Let's get you fixed for the long run instead of the short-term
short run,
gratification. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's a beauty about being on the outside now, being able to still coach and mentor, because I'm not beholden to a commander. I'm not beholden to a command structure. No, like it's before I did worry about saying things like, hey, don't worry about X, Y, and Z. Prioritize you. I remember having these candid conversations with, because when I came back after my treatments, I went inpatient and had to do intensive outpatient. And I came back, walked away from the team, and took up the dreaded job down at S3.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
a
yeah.
nightmare position. You're down there, but within that operations, within that battalion office, there's a lot of broken individuals, and there's a lot of high performing individuals that aren't necessarily a Green Beret.
That's
They're
right.
support guys. But let me tell you something. That battalion runs off the hard work and dedication of those support individuals, and
That's
they
right.
get overworked. And I'm seeing individuals are struggling with the same things that I was struggling with in a team room. And
Yeah.
and it's like that quick, like, hey, come in the office, sit down. Why, instead of working through lunch, go off site, take a breather, go get a coffee. Have you gone to P3? Have you talked to Thor 3? You're stagnant all day long. Take some time for you. It's, oh no, I have all this stuff to do. Like, no, the work will be
Yeah.
here when you get back.
Yep.
Like being able to like, oh shit, contradict the culture. It's like, oh
Yeah.
man, like gotta whisper it now. No, I can yell it. I can scream it. Take time for yourself. If I would have just done that just a little bit in addressing the mind, body, and the spirit, because dude, I was depleted in every sphere. I didn't
Yeah.
take any time to myself. And
Yeah.
now looking back, now being able to tell that to the individual that's still in, like, hey, you can still have that 20, 30-year career. It's what you do in those little bits and moments of freedom that like you can walk away from lunch. Instead of going for beers with the guys, say like, hey, let's go do a workout. Let's go hang out without alcohol. Let's go. If you're overworked and you're stressed out, go talk to somebody about it. You can still be a powerful Green Beret or a Ranger or active duty infantry. You can do all these things. You just have to take the steps and be an active and willing participant in your own life. but you couldn't get me to say that when I was still in uniform.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing.
I think the hardest thing, it's still hard for me now. Well, is saying no.
Yeah.
Saying no is the
Yes.
hardest thing. It is. I still will task saturate myself to this day if somebody calls and be like, "Hey, can you do this headshots or these photo shoots?" And
Yeah.
I'll look at my calendar and be like, "Well, not really, but yep, I got you. I'll do it." And I'll say to say it in uniform is kind of one of those things you think it might be a death sentence for your career.
Yeah.
And I'll just share a quick story. Is right before I was going to take a company as a first sergeant, I was supposed to take a line company, one of the the line companies at the Ranger Regiment. But the company commander that was there, and I won't name names, I didn't see eye to eye with him. We'd worked together in the past. We were not simpatico, if you will, right? And I would have taken that company, right? If that's what the regiment wanted me to do, I would have taken it. But I was in Germany on a flight over, right? And the battalion commander and I were in the bathroom washing our hands, and he goes, "Hey, Yuma, I heard that you're not too excited about going to take this company." And I said, "Well, sir, I'll do whatever the battalion wants me to do. But if you ask me right now if I want to, I say no. I'd rather do something else." The first time I'd ever said no to a duty position ever, right? Out loud to somebody with authority.
Yeah.
and they changed it, and they gave me the Delta Company instead, which was like a blessing in disguise. I never thought I'd want to go run the snipers and the recce teams and the TSE guys and the mortars, but because I'd never done that. Yeah. But I learned by the end of my career, I'm learning, right? I'm learning things I've never known. I had to lead people through and challenges that I'd never understood, had to challenge me as a leader. So me saying no, in a brief conversation in a bathroom was a career defining, human defining, altering moment for me. So any service member, anybody out there, it's okay to say no, to take care of yourself, because I knew by saying no, I was going to be I could have been a better leader somewhere else. Yeah. So, but it's hard. Saying no is hard.
It's the hardest thing. And same experience. I came back, and the first sit down with my company command, I walk in, and that's company commander, sergeant major, my company warrant. Everybody's like, "You ready to go back to the team?" And it's like, "No, I'm not. Yeah. I'm done. Like, and that's thinking like I would have never in my entire life have thought that I would say that to walk away from the team, but I made up my mind. And there's nothing wrong with prioritizing yourself and your family.
Right.
Like at the end of the day, the organization is going to continue the march. There is nobody that is going to be bulletproof or impervious to that. That's the right. Teams, Ranger Regiment, it will continue to move without you.
Yep.
And if you hang on desperately way past your time, it's going to be painful. It's going to suck. And I didn't want that. I knew I wanted to go out on my terms and leave and go live my life and be healthy. When you're that broken, when you have real issues to deal with, that's not the place for you. And I knew it wasn't the place for me anymore. It was time for me to prioritize myself, my wife, because that's the reality of it. The team at home, that's the team that's going to get you through life. Yep. Your wife, your kids, those are the people who are going to always be there for you. That team changes, that platoon rotates. I mean, if you look back on the life cycle of a Ranger Regiment platoon, like when you're in the deployments, when you're in the training, it feels like, oh, this family is going to always stick together.
That's right.
And then it's like 1 by 1 or 2 by 2, everything changes. And then before you know it, you're like, oh, fuck, I'm the last one on this train.
That's right.
Fuck.
That's right. I had one of my kind of defining moments because I had to do the same, it's like, hey, you're going to be a sergeant major, you're competitive to take a Ranger battalion, which is nothing's guaranteed at that point. Right. So you take a lot of risk there. And I ultimately said no, to retire. But I did an exercise one day where I wrote out where I want to be when I'm 65.
Yeah.
So I wrote it out and I read it. And to my surprise, it didn't say anything about being a Ranger, and it didn't say anything about being wealthy. It said, I want to have my family, right? I want to be laughing. I want to be sitting around like Thanksgiving table, talking about stories that I have with my kids, at their events and on this property that we own. And that's when it kind of came clear to me, like, hey, in the grand scheme of things, the 21 years I spent in regiment, hopefully, is going to be a small, very small section of, my whole life. And, uh, and it's said all the time, the regiment's a thankless organization. And you have to kind of dig into that saying. It is because it has to be.
Yeah.
Because the nation needs to be ready to fight and win its nation's wars, and worrying about Yuma is not, that top priority there once you leave. So once you can swallow that pill and put your values and your priorities straight, I realized that the Ranger Regiment, the Army, it was time. It's time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's and that's the beauty of it, right? Understanding when you get that plaque, when you get your ceremony, your little, whether it's with a close group of knit of friends, just that with your team or platoon, that's it. That's what matters. The human connections you made while you served. There is no lasting legacy. And if there is, for a lot of us, you weren't around to see that. And that's sad.
Yeah.
You're not going to get the fanfare if you're still alive.
That's right.
Walk away and understand that your service is bigger. You're part of an amazing organization. Like that legacy is going to always continue on. It's going to always be there. You had it, you experienced it. Now it's a footnote. Like it'll help you achieve greater things in life. Like I don't ever look back on my career and say like, wow, man, like horrible. Like, yeah, you went through some horrible shit. There's some great moments in there. There's some great things.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. But don't look back with regret. Don't look back with sadness that you weren't able to spend 30, 40, 50 years. Like, no, you're still alive. It might hurt to move your knees or your hips. It might be a little slower in the mornings, but man, you achieved something so great. Move forward with your life and have that experience project you and put you on a path to success in the future. There's so many of our guys that kind of leave and they don't know where to go. And that's the beauty of the Honor Foundation is when I went through that program, I knew I had a path. I knew what I was going to do. And you still got to put everything together, but at least you walk out understanding like, dude, like I'm a solid individual. I succeeded in regiment, I succeeded in the teams. Like I'm going to be fucking all right. And they just removing that fear of like, oh fuck, what am I going to do? Like, dude, you're going to be fine. And we need to be able to talk about this program and get more people involved. Cause that's the most contact I get throughout the day is transition.
Yeah.
Hey, how'd you get through your transition? What helped you? And it's like, dude, honestly, understanding that my time was over and being able to remove that identity.
Yep.
Like,
yeah. So yeah, the Honor Foundation was absolutely a game changer for me, right? Because obviously you don't know what you're going to do when you get out, right?
Yeah.
I'm right here by Fort Benning, Fort Moore. Fort Moore, I guess is what it is now.
I still have a hard time with that as well.
Me too. That's another podcast. But I saw myself doing something I didn't want to do, right? I saw myself retiring on Friday and driving back onto Fort Moore on Monday in civilian clothes and with a little bit of facial stubble because I'm growing my beard and going probably right back into the same S3 shop and working that civilian job, right?
Yep.
And the Honor Foundation made me, help me understand me, help me tell my story, put me in contact with people that made me understand the value that I bring outside of government organizations, which there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want to do. But it just changed my whole perspective on me, right? And helped me say I and look at things that I had done and with a different lens. And I mean, if it wasn't for the Honor Foundation, there would be no Leading with Vulnerability podcast. There would be no all the stuff that I've shared on social media about things I've gone through and helping people out. I would have stayed closed off and just kept grinding, right? But they were that 12 weeks allowed me and made me pull my head up and look around and not only see me but kind of the rest of the world around me.
Yeah.
And just really kind of altered the path of my post-military career. It really did. And I'm super thankful for that organization. Give back to it as much as I can. But I wish I'm glad they just started the Vector Accelerator to
Yeah.
where anybody in SOF, even if you didn't come from SOF, can go in and kind of have some of the Honor Foundation light experience, if you will. But
Yeah.
when I see SOF members, and I tell them like the Honor Foundation and this and that, and it's free, and then they don't go, I feel I'm like beating my head against a wall. It's like, what?
Same here.
I'm talking to E5s again, and you're a grown ass man. I'm like, I don't understand it. I wish everybody would go through it. Obviously they couldn't handle that throughput, but it's hard to describe what that organization and that 12 weeks can do for you coming out of uniform.
Absolutely. And I'm in the same boat. I had already launched a podcast and I was already doing my advocacy work, but I never saw it as real work. I never put it in the forefront of things that could be my reality. I was just like, oh, I'm nobody. I can't do this. Like nobody's going to listen. And then the more I led with actually being vulnerable and actually started putting my truth in those exercises and speaking on it and be like, dude, like this is what I'm passionate about. Why am I looking at contracting work? Why am I looking at wanting to do X, Y, and Z just because other people are doing it? And realizing and finally coming up with having that vision and having that statement and realizing, and it was right when they were about to do the trek. I got contacted by a good friend of mine, Jen Murphy, holler and plug at her. She's like, hey, you're going to go to this military influencer conference thing. And I was like, I've never heard of this. MIC, I didn't know about it at that point in time. And I looked into it and I had the right amount of money. I already had I had a team around me. I had people that could go with me. And I decided to go all in. I'm like, you know what? Like, I don't see anybody representing what we bring to the table. I don't see another podcast. I don't see another person like me talking and having this engagement. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go in this 100%. And that's what I needed. I needed to have that space where I could put all this time and effort into thinking about what I was doing, what I was really passionate about. And by the time I came back from MIC and sat back down in the chair at my local the Eglin cohort here, like I knew like, okay, this is what I'm doing. Like having that understanding that like, if you're doing something every single day and you're passionate about it and brings you purpose and it's your why, that's your fucking thing. Yeah. Be courageous enough, have the audacity to dream big and do it. Yeah. It doesn't matter what other people are saying. If you can generate income from it, because that's the other thing. I was getting paid to produce another podcast, and I still didn't see it as an opportunity for myself. I didn't want to dream big enough. I was like, no, I better do something that, that's more along the lines of a former Green Beret. It's like, no, fuck that. Fuck the system.
Yeah, right. Right. Yeah. And, with that is, if guys or gals or anybody that, it's okay. If you want to go back and contract or you want to go back and work government, that's great. What the Honor Foundation can give you is the tools to say, you need to pay me more.
Yeah.
And here's why. Here's the story as why. It can help you go on your own path like we have, and find our passion. It can also help you if you stay on the path that's, more of us select than not. It can help you be more successful on that path.
Yes.
Right. And understanding, because if you understand you and you can tell your story, you can be a very powerful person in the room if you know your value. Yeah. What I talk to guys who don't go through transition programs, they'll be like, there wasn't really, they'll say the salary range was between 80 and 130. And I'm saying, well, then you should start at 130. And they're like, what? What do you mean? That's where there's no, why would you limit yourself? I'm like, well, I don't know how to tell. Well, I'm like, you got to go have somebody coach you and do it. But look, there's this free thing that would have done that for you, So, there's multiple things that THF helps you with, right?
Yeah. Now I want to ask you, what were some of the tools that you eventually leaned on once you transitioned to get back to that better mindset? Um, like for me, mindfulness was the key to tie everything again. But how did you go back to address the mind, body, and spirit? Because after doing this job, this type of work for 21 years, I have to imagine that you might have had some health issues.
Yeah, there's a few. Yeah, there's a few. I mean, I think there's two, maybe three, probably three primary things that I try to do. And there's other things on the outside too that I do. But uh, one is staying physically active, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had to change my narrative on physically active. I don't need to run 5 miles in 35 minutes anymore. I don't need to do Ranger physical assessment tests in 38 minutes and deadlift 500 pounds. But I had to get up. You've got to get up and move and get outside and breathe fresh air and look at the horizon and throw some weight around and move. And that brings me so much clarity, right? Clears my mind, gets that dopamine hit there. And the second thing that I didn't realize until, I was getting out and doing this podcast thing and the photography thing is creativity.
Yeah.
Creating things and doing things. I don't think I realized how creative I was in the service. So from the squad leader level up, you're always being creative and you're creating infield plans and execution on an objective. And you're looking at angles and lines and you're looking at imagery and drawing things and you're creating and you're thinking in your mind like what you're going to do tonight, and you're in Afghanistan and you're in the valley and you're creating stuff. You're a creator. You really are. You're an artist. And that kind of diminishes as you go up in chain of command, because then you're just a product pusher, right? Or a yes man, or approving stuff. So once I started, just personally like making YouTube videos and taking photos and creating, it made me feel better. Right. Yeah. So I still try to do that now with the business that I run now, or just being deliberate about being creative. Having a creative mindset helps me in the right space, because you can't be drunk and hungover and go do a photo shoot of my son's wrestling match. It just doesn't work. Right. That wouldn't be fun for anybody. So that's super important. And then the last thing is simple as family. Right. Yeah. And that, deliberate with the family, right? Trying to be there and help them out and just being with the family, right? Is the three kind of main things that I hang on. And there's all kinds of other little stuff, reading and journaling and other things. But I think it's as simple as the old saying, idle hands are the devil's workshop. Yep. Right. I even, I like to play a little Call of Duty from now and then. So what I do, I turn it into a fundraising event. Right. Yeah. And I just keeping busy in a creative space is really what kind of keeps my mind where it needs to be. Cause I do notice winter months come along or a bad weather comes along and I'm stuck in the house and I didn't get any sunlight and I haven't worked out in a while. All of a sudden it's 2 glasses of bourbon on a Tuesday, right? Yep. Instead of waiting until Friday, you're starting a little early. So, that stuff's, that's a few things that I do to stay, mindful.
I got to ask you now that I know you read, because that's something I sell and try to sell to so many guys. When we deal with traumatic brain injuries, that capacity to pay attention gets really short.
Oh, it's terrible.
But that's one thing that I was able to train back. And once I got it back to a point where I consistently read, instead of highlighting every word and having to reread pages after pages, once I could start reading again, that's when I realized, like, okay, I don't have to just rely on everybody else's word. I can dig into concepts. I can dig into the same material that the doctor's going to reference. Like, I have a pathway to like empower myself with knowledge. And that became a passion, reading and taking the time to like take that data, take that information, put it in a blog post, share it with everybody else.
That's right.
But what are some of your favorite books that you've started reading?
See, if I go with just some of my favorites that I've read, it's Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Hell yeah.
And then Brene Brown, she Atlas of the Heart, and
Yep.
then the Daring Greatly. That's the reason for the podcast. Daring Greatly and all of
Yeah.
her vulnerability work. Books that like those are kind of like life impacting and altering, right? Like
Yeah.
on a internal level, right?
Yeah.
Something that I read in the last couple of years that I wish I would have read years ago as a leader was the 7 Habits of highly effective
Yep.
people, right? I'm sitting there
Yeah.
reading that and I'm like, that book helped translate all my military experience into civilian words in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I'm like, golly, if I would have just read this as a squad leader, I could have been so much more, not an effective, like on the battlefield, but a more effective communicator to get my point across to commanders and stuff like that. So those are kind of the 3 there. And what I'm reading now is, a former regiment guy wrote a book called Power Up, and it's a leadership book based in the superhero universe. So it does parallels between
Nice.
Batman and the boys and stuff, and how that ties into leadership and the world. So when I do, similar to you, when I talk to people, I say, man, I just wish I would have started reading earlier.
Yep.
Legacy about the All Blacks,
Yeah.
I made my son read it this past year to understand, and I'll still go by him and understand, like, sweep the sheds, what does that mean, and have those conversations. But you're right. The information is out there, and that ties into education, right?
Yeah.
I got my degree because you're supposed to, and the Army paid for it at the last 18 months of my career because I'm a professional procrastinator. But I picked a degree path that was the easiest and the fastest to get through, and somebody's watching out for me because the organizational leadership program brought a lot of this literature into my life.
Yeah.
And you don't have to go to a university to get an education. You can go to the library and read and take notes and think and get an education. You're right. The free, it's kind of like THF, right? The information's there. It's free. Why don't you use it? Right. It's there. So it's important. And then you're right with the TBI stuff, all the explosive breaches and hard jumps I've had. I've found that reading is a good way for me to kind of calm the brain. And it's a challenge still at times, the rabbit, the squirrel, to be focused and be present for, an hour of reading. It's hard, but that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
I'm challenging myself to do something to get better. So super important. Love it. Yeah.
Hell yeah. Now, before I let you go, I do have to do some rapid fire questions for you.
Okay.
All right. Rapid fire with Yuma Barnett. Okay. M4 or Scar Heavy?
M4.
Cries or old school BDUs?
Cry.
Static line or free fall?
Free fall all day.
If you could do it all over again, same path or different MOS?
Oh, exact same.
Hell yeah. Chili Mac or chicken with noodles?
Chili Mac.
Good man. I would say you're sus.
That's why I have to take a Zantac every morning for the rest of my life because of Chili Mac.
Staff duty or work the gate?
Oh my, work the gate. I'm not going to shoot anybody on staff duty. Maybe at the gate.
If you had to redo Ranger School phase nonstop for a year, which phase would it be and why?
Florida. There's no mountains in Florida, and it's close to the end.
Army PTs or Ranger panties for the rest of your life for leisure wear?
Oh, it's panties, obviously.
Chucks or Solomons?
Solomon's.
Good choice. Chucks fucked my feet up.
Yep.
They look cool. Best part about being a Ranger?
The boys.
Hell yeah. Unpopular military opinion, go.
We all have PTSD and are jacked up.
Best rank in the military?
Corporal.
Nice. Who would win in no holds barred fight to the death? Chow Hall lady or CIF lady?
CIF.
Change one thing about the military.
Oh my gosh, one thing about the military. One thing about the military. I don't know. There's so many things that it would change.
I'd bring back the specialist technical ranks because some dudes are great.
Oh yeah, the technicals. That's a good thought there. Yeah. We actually looked into that in the thing we did one time. But yeah, that's a good one. I'll go with that. Sounds good.
Most influential Ranger leader you had and why?
Damn. Well, he wasn't a leader, but I'm looking at him and it's my roommate, Matt Commons, who was killed on our first trip. And it's because every day I tried to live, for him and do the right thing. So, that's the guy that influenced me the most,
Oh yeah. Yeah. Favorite thing to bring on deployment?
PlayStation.
Best deployment memory ever?
Oh gosh, these are tough ones. Best deployment memory ever. It's got to be my last trip into the mountains there with another agency was because I knew it was my last time on the ground. I knew that was it. That was the last one.
Yep. Yeah. Same with me. it just stays with you on that ramp the last time. That was for me. And then top five reasons why a young person should enlist and become a Ranger.
Top 5. The community, just the people there. Not necessarily a Ranger, but just join the military is if you do the math on the benefits and everything you can get for it for the rest of your life, it's not too bad. It's a great place to work if you want to be challenged every day, to do your best and be with the best. I don't know. There's so many. It's just, if you want to challenge yourself, that's the place to go. Right.
Yeah.
And it's a great place to start if that's not where you want to end. If you want to go to SF, you want to go to Virginia, you want to go do other things in the military, the Ranger Regiment is probably the best place to start a military career. And because I don't know too many people that left, even if we kicked them out of the Ranger Regiment, that weren't successful in the Army or SF or somewhere else, just because of the baseline standards and discipline you got there. Kind of like it's like a Nick Saban culture there. So
I was just gonna say it's Alabama.
Yep.
Yeah. Yuma, thank you so much for being here today, man. An absolute pleasure to find somebody else that's doing the same mission, has the same purpose and the why, man. It's absolute pleasure to have you today. And hope to have you back on someday, brother.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's great. Thanks for what you're doing as well. It's awesome stuff. Thank you.
Absolutely. And we'll see you guys next time. Take care.